I wanted to, I think, Justin, you have a really interesting perspective that will resonate with what I imagine are a lot of our listeners that are either stepping into sort of lead BD roles or considering it and wondering what to do, how to get started. So you've done that 3 times at 3 different firms, as I understand it. You have a new firm, you have a new fund, ready to deploy. What do you do? What are those first steps?
First step is important. It's the infrastructure build, right? What comes out of all the conversations you have at conferences and Teams calls and road shows? It's data, right? It's not only deals, but it's, this company is doing this deal. We pitched that and lost it, and those guys won it. We're bringing this one out. It's this size of this profile. How well can you capture all that data and then report around it, analyze it, let that inform future decision making? That is the infrastructure that you need at day one to start building. So what does the infrastructure look like? CRM, right? We use Salesforce. I could talk on a whole nother podcast about the value of Salesforce and how it integrates across multiple functional areas within private equity. You need a good M&A database so you can track companies. Grata, Source Scrub, Sutton Place Strategies is ours. You need a good old-fashioned MailChimp or email marketing campaign. You need to be talking to the market when you're doing deals, when you're building the team, when you're raising money, selling companies. If you're not talking to the market, they're not going to know what's happening. And the more you talk to the market with insightful, interesting content, they'll talk back and deal flow will come in. Same thing with social media on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of using LinkedIn to promote what you're doing. You guys do that great on your end as well. Very important tool. And I'll stop right there and just say, you don't have to have a 20 tech deep stack. 3 or 4 things that you're really deep on and using well that are all integrated can get the job done. So don't index on the quantity of tech would be my advice to a new group, but focus on 2 or 3 things where you can get really deep and customize those platforms to your own business needs.
You seem to mention that you're using Salesforce to capture more than just the standard, Grata or Source Scrub exports. Like, is that, you guys have custom objects in there? Have you built like other sorts of things that you guys are tracking? Like, what is it? What are the sets of data that you're talking about that you guys are tracking?
Yeah. So every conversation we have gets logged in Salesforce. If it's relevant to one or more platforms or theses, then it gets tagged. So that's every conversation. And we track how long it's been since I've talked to XYZ banker in XYZ region or an XYZ vertical. We obviously track all the deals that come in and all the metrics around those and report around them. We have a talent module. So any executive that we're interested in to be at one of our platforms gets tagged in Salesforce and linked to a portco with his or her skill set and all the details around conversations that have been had with that person. Lenders, same thing. All these lenders are reaching out. There's valuable relationships to be had there, not only from a financing standpoint, but from a market intel standpoint. Some of the best intel I've gotten on deals that we want or don't want have come from lenders. So we tag them in there and their parameters for sourcing and who they've worked with, et cetera. And the list can go on and on. There's also third-party service providers that you need for various pre or post-close diligence that have different strengths and capabilities. You tag that stuff in there. So we have a kind of a multi-pronged set of modules in Salesforce that the whole team uses that really makes for efficient work days.
It seems like there's a lot of different pieces, multi-pronged approach. If you had to boil it down, are there key metrics that guide you?
We track conversations. How many conversations are you having? We track deal flow. What deals are we seeing? What deals are we not seeing? Right? And we have what we call our house accounts. Now, for middle market groups or groups that have larger funds that are chasing more auction deals, you have to make sure you're keeping score with these banks. We're spending a lot of time traveling to them, talking about the deals we're looking to get, learning about the deals they just closed. How many deals are we seeing from them that are relevant? So we have Sutton Place Strategies, which is an M&A database that was previously owned, I think that's still owned by Bain. Really cool. It shows all the deals that are happening in market in your target verticals. That's integrated with Salesforce that shows all the deals we've seen, and we net those out. And when you can say, okay, what deals did Citizens do that we didn't see? Or what are the deals that Houlihan did that we didn't see that we should have in environmental services or outsourced legal or whatever? And then you take that each week and you look at it and you make phone calls and you do outreach based on the deals you didn't see. And you'd be shocked. You never don't see a deal a second time. They know to send you the next one. And so that's just an example of how the tech talks to each other to help you plan out your outreach.
Is that mostly like when you think about identifying like, hey, I just saw Houlihan did this deal. It's in my space. It was a, fire and life safety deal, right? And so like we should have seen that. Why didn't we see? Like, is that the conversation, or like what? How do you approach those conversations when you're reaching out to them?
It depends on how well I know the sponsor coverage person or the banker. Typically, it's like, look, this is a space we're spending a lot of time in. Here's an example. We bid on XYZ business. This one, that one. They're going to know the businesses. It's all the same companies. So you can speak to your expertise in it briefly. We like the space. We're spending time here. We own this business. It would be a great tuck in. Would love to get a debrief from your industry team on this. And so that's the goal, is trying to get to the industry bankers who are the ultimate decision makers when it comes to the buyer lists, and make sure that you're registering interest in that sector with them. In a perfect world, I would have done that already, but there's only one of me. And so on a weekly basis, I will find a deal that I would have loved to have seen that we missed. And so then you reach out to that banker, get a debrief call on the books, and you'll get the next one.
Do you target kind of going after bankers of a certain size, or banks of a certain size, or like, because I know there's too many bankers in the world to cover. Like, how do you make that determination of like these are the ones I'm going to spend time with, and these are the ones that I'm not?
It's a great question, and we have a unique challenge here at Agellus because we have wide parameters for the deals we'll do. 2 to 20 of EBITDA is our range. Ideally, if we do our jobs, we're growing those companies to 30, 40, 50. So that's 3 different cohorts of investment banks. You've got lower middle market banks doing $5-6 million EBITDA deals we have to stay in front of. Then you have the middle market banks, the Houlihans, Lincolns, Harris Williams. They're doing, $10 to $20 million EBITDA deals, sometimes bigger. And then you have your Jefferies, your Lazards, your true upper middle markets that if we do our jobs well, we're using them to sell because they're selling into the large cap sponsor universe. So I have to cover all 3. And the answer, Dan, is it's all by industry specialization. Like, I'm talking to IT services bankers every week because we have a platform there that we're building. I'm talking to blue collar facility services bankers every week at banks, from the tiny boutiques to the true middle markets to the upper middle market.
So folks that have done a deal in the space, right?
Folks that have done deals in the space, they're the most relevant, or that are tracking the space or trying to do deals in the space. And if you do it all comes together, right? If you do a good job with your PR and your outreach, whether it's your announcing platforms you've done, or if I'm blasting 15,000 people with an email blast saying, Agellus seeks restoration services businesses, the inbound will come, and then you can have those conversations and build up the network for that specific vertical.
It makes a ton of sense. And you're tracking most of that SPS, right? You kind of say like, hey, dude, who did a deal in this space? Who did a deal in my space? Like, I'm going to be in front of them. And it sounds like using those metrics to also identify who you're spending the most time with. I'm curious, do you look at like some of those equivalents on the buy side of the equation as well, in terms of like tracking people by metrics, deals they did in the space to kind of say, oh gosh, these are the buy side firms I really need to be working with?
We do. Admittedly, the structure on that is not as automated as I'd like it to be, as it is on the sell side. But we know the buy side groups. We get a lot of intel from buy side groups, and we talk to them about the deals they're doing with our competitors. And sometimes we'll sign agreements for fallout. We have a fire and life safety platform. There are many groups that are doing fire and life safety roll-ups. We know the buy side advisors that are representing those folks. We talk to them. And if XYZ company passes on a $2 million EBITDA business in LA, maybe we can get that one. So I think that's an important relationship to maintain as well with those guys for those reasons.
I heard an interesting tactic on this last week. I was talking to somebody there saying, well, what we do is, and maybe they hate me for saying this, I don't know, but what we do is we actually pay a small retainer to the ones that are really doing stuff in our space. It's with one of our competitors to make sure we see the second one, second pass on anything they pass on. So while we don't have them on a full retainer for doing a dedicated search, if I've seen they've done a bunch of deals in my space, I throw them a little monthly bone and I make sure I get second pass on everything.
That's brilliant. I love that idea. And I can think of 3 firms off the top of my head that we should be doing that with.
So if we look at maybe the first thing that you focus on as you step into a new role as a BD person, leading the function, putting the infrastructure in place is key. So you have your CRM, you have your kind of data sources. What's next? Once you feel like you have that in place, if you could kind of form the framework or give us the framework for folks that are maybe entering a position like this, because it's a really common search for us is first time hire at a firm that hasn't had BD before. And so they have a sales force, they obviously have relationships. But what's that next piece after you get the infrastructure in place?
I'll just say as a disclaimer, your BD efforts will only be as fruitful as your thesis is sound, right? So if you have a good investment thesis as a fund, presumably you do, you've raised money and you know what verticals you're targeting. Step 1 after the infrastructure is find out who are the bankers and brokers doing deals in my space. That's crucial. And map that out. Coast to coast, whatever your verticals are, whatever your sub verticals, you can find through these M&A databases and through the tech stack you've now built, who are the folks doing deals in my sectors, and get on the phone with them. Hit the road, go to the conferences. I'm at every conference, it's tiresome work, but it's fruitful work because nothing builds a relationship or makes you more memorable than sharing a coffee or a beer with someone on the road in Vegas or Boston or Scottsdale. So market map the bankers, get in front of them, let them know this is our sector of interest, this is why, and you'll start to see the deal flow come in from those folks.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned a point of kind of getting on the road, right? And it's a lot of people I talk to, I'm like, that's my number one point of emphasis of probably the most underrated and underutilized thing today is like, get on the road, get in front of them in person, right? Happen to be places, happen to be wherever they are, right? Because that at least my experience is like building that human to human relationship. It's one thing to do it on a Zoom call, but you do it in person and you pretty quickly have the ability to stick in the back of their mind as a real human being. And I don't know if that's because there's more information that's actually translated in terms of, bits and bytes when you're in person versus through a video screen, right? And like all the, all other subtle kind of human cues and everything else like that. But gosh, I've just always felt like the quality and the depth of the relationship you get from that in-person meeting is, I wish I could measure it, but probably orders of magnitude, stronger than doing a video call.
100%. And that's why the conference scene is so valuable. But the sad thing is, Dan, is that the secret's out. These conferences are jam-packed.
Well, what kind of conferences though, right? Like, are we talking, ACG conferences, or are we talking industry conferences?
Both. Banker-led, banker-hosted conferences, ACG and M&A conferences, and then the industry conferences, which candidly, I'll be doing more of this year than I did last year. So I can't speak with as much authority on the industry conferences. But for example, I went to, I think, 16 conferences last year, mostly M&A and banker hosted. And I got waitlisted for M&A East in Philly, which I'm still upset about, but it just speaks to the amount of volume out there for folks out there chasing deals, right? There's so much more dollars available to chase deals than there are deals to be chased in this market. And you guys have read all the headlines around the kind of the macro conditions that created that everyone's on the road. Everyone's trying to talk to your banker. Everyone's in the ACG portal trying to schedule a meeting at the same time you are. And it creates a whole other dynamic around how do you out hustle the competition? Once you have a sound playbook, how do I execute it in a way that allows me to get there first and get the meeting or just see the deal, much less be able to bid on it, right? So it's a whole other layer of competition that's new to this market over the last couple of years, at least from my perspective.
So what's the better play today? I mean, because if everybody's showing up to those same conferences, like, is there a different angle to play today?
It's a great question. The angle that I would play, kind of the ace, is just do a road show. Say, go to Cleveland for a week and go talk to the 5 or 10 Cleveland banks and say, hey, I'm going to be in Cleveland. I'd love to meet with you, right? That is the ultimate. If a banker's going to host you in their office, they know you're really serious. You come prepared. You meet with 3 or 4 industry bankers at the same time. They will not forget you. The next best thing would be meeting them at a conference, meeting them over a dinner or drinks. And then obviously at the other end is the Zoom call, which it's better than nothing, but you can get a road show on the books. Nothing beats it.
Yeah, I'm with it. I would just always call those kind of city trips, right, or regional trips, whatever you want to call them. But it's like, hey, just make an excuse to be in a place, set up as many meetings as you can, right, and then you're not just kind of competing with everybody else at that conference, right?
Happen to be places more is one of my favorite Dan Hur lines.
Yeah,
Like,
it's great. And, and you can even do it if you're really aggressive. You can do it adjacent to a conference,
right.
right? Because who are typically at the conferences? Generally not the person leading the deal that you want to win. They're important relationships to have. And I want as many friends at Houlihan and Lincoln and Harris Williams as I can get. But if I want to talk to the industry banker that just sold that environmental services deal that I never got to see, but wanted to, that person's probably at their desk working on the next one during the ACG conference. So if I'm at ACG Chicago, let me spend an extra day to go hit them up and a few other banks in their office.
I'm curious, how do you end up tiering bankers, right? Or breaking them up or bucketing them, right? Like I imagine you have kind of like, here's my top tier banker. Like what's your rating system for breaking them down?
Yeah. So it's kind of subjective. We have house accounts. We'll have a couple thousand conversations a year with, several hundred different banks, but we have our top 30 to 40 that we call house accounts that are large banks that have different specializations. Different industry subsets.
So does house account, that's a label on a bank itself where you're like this. So how many house accounts would there be at a time?
Right now we have about 30, but that's going to grow. And it's a function of how many banks are doing deal flow consistently in our target verticals, right? So there could be boutiques like, Republic Partners is a boutique TNL investment bank out of Chicago. They're not doing 50 deals a year, but they're doing 5 to 10 that are really valuable for us. Or it could be, a Jeggy who's in New York and they're doing outsourced legal, kind of leaders in that market. So those are regionals, but they're doing a lot of deal flow in our target verticals. Generally speaking, it's the big ones I keep mentioning. So like all the Harris Williams, Lincoln, Houlihan, Ray J, finding out the bankers there that are doing deals in our verticals. And those are the ones that we call house accounts and staying on top of them almost monthly.
So that's okay, interesting. Because I was going to ask that next question. One of the things when you think about like sales and marketing best practices, one of the things you typically do is you have what's called these SLAs, right? You say, like, here's your service level agreements, here's our expectation, our standard of excellence for those house accounts. So like, what is that overall standard of excellence for house accounts? It sounds like part of that is engage them monthly, but is there a set of things you expect to make sure you do with your house accounts?
We have to stay in touch with the industry bankers that are in our target verticals regularly. Get in front of every deal they're doing. And by in front, I mean 3 to 6 month head start. Like if they're pitching a deal, I want to learn about it. If they lost the pitch, who else was there? I'm going to go talk to them. Why did you turn down the mandate, or why did you lose the pitch? Did you win it? When's it coming out? Tell me about it. Oh, by the way, we really like this. Can we talk to management before you launch? Right? That takes time to build a relationship of that level. But if you have that cadence of conversation and you're there in person, then you can get to that point with these groups, to the point where we call it an advantaged auction. That's like a field label in our Salesforce CRM versus a relative auction.
So what qualifies something as having reached that stage of advantage auction, right? Does that mean you've met with the management team or the ownership in advance of the process, or like what allows that label to exist?
We're getting a head start on the deal courtesy of the bank. We're getting inside information, early access to the MP to the management team, or there's a storied history with that bank or that banker that we know we're going to get a favor, we're going to get the last look, even though it's not explicitly stated.
It's really interesting, man. That's right. So as we think about what's behind house accounts, like are there other buckets, or is it just like house account or not house account?
It's a great question, and I'm embarrassed to say there's nothing behind it yet, but there will be. I mean, that's the reality. That's kind of the model that we use right now. I'm a proponent of it, which is spend 80% of your time with the top 20 to 30% of the most valuable relationships. And then don't neglect the rest of the folks, but just make sure that 80% of your time's focused there, right? And after you've been doing it for a while, specifically with the sector focus and theses that are pretty well defined, it's the same cast of characters. And spoiler alert, a lot of other funds are doing the same thing. So if I don't spend enough time with them, someone else will come in and they'll have their own advantaged auction on that deal. So it's hyper competitive right now. We could talk about deals we've missed out on that. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a bank I met with last summer in Chicago, previewed a really attractive asset, environmental services. We flagged it. We tagged it. We got ready. We found out it was in market 6 months later. I reached out to the sponsor coverage rep there and said, hey, why aren't we seeing this? We talked about this. It's right down the fairway for us. He's like, can't let you in. I'm like, why? He says, well, there's only 10 groups that get to see this deal, and they've been digging in for 3 to 6 months. They're all billion-dollar funds. They either have an asset in the space or have really leaned in on the sector recently. Those groups beat us. They got to the punch first. They did their homework, and I didn't get to see that deal. And so on the next one, you learn, okay, let me get in front of that. Let me make sure that we're registering strong interest 3 to 5 months or 6 months before launch to make sure I'm on the list for the next one.
That's crazy. So that's where we're at now.
That's where we're at. And it's happening all the time. Banks are running narrower processes for a slew of reasons. One, they just don't have the time to host 10 MPs and manage 50 IOIs. But also, there's still a lot of heartburn from the post-COVID days. 23 was a rocky year. A lot of processes busted in the 7th or 8th inning. And if you're a banker, that looks really bad. So how do you prevent that? You cull your list. And you make sure that you're going to send this to folks that are qualified. They're not going to mess around. They already know the sector.
Yeah, but it's not even just like a cull it down to a fireside chat sort of thing. Like what we're talking about now is we're saying like, I'm only going to work with the firms that have done pre-work before we even launch the auction.
Yeah. And those firms, even though there's only 10 of them, will bid each other up and get the ultimate outcome. But you save a lot of time and you concentrate your efforts. And it's kind of, they view it as a win-win. The founder's time is protected. The conversations are easier to have. The diligence is easier because those groups know it. And that's just a function of there being so many private equity firms now. And I'll bring it all back to thesis development, right? If it's specific environmental services, there's 10, 20 groups that do that really, really well. And so those bankers know those guys and they're going to get the first look. So when you have that thesis lined up, you got to scream it to the market so you can get that phone call too, because less calls are going out, specifically for scaled assets in banked auctions, right? This is a subset of the market that's not applicable everywhere, but it's real.
What's enough pre-work to have done before an auction now then?
You've either accessed or paid for a market study. You've done full thesis work. That's like, 6 to 9 months of work at the firm level that's pretty collaborative and programmatic, where you have an idea and then spend 6 to 8 months trying to find out why it's a bad idea. And if you can't figure out why it's a bad idea after 6 to 8 months, it's probably a good idea. You talk to lenders, bankers, other sponsors. You get executives lined up who have worked in the space. And once you've checked all those boxes and your thesis is sound, then you can tell that story to a banker and show them the work you've done, reference deals that they did or other groups have done, ask intelligent questions. What are the value drivers in this sector? We saw this business traded at this multiple. You think this one's going to trade at that multiple? Why? And then it's a very much more informed conversation where you impress upon that banker, hey, okay, these guys are ready to play in this sector. They're not going to waste my time.